Hi, so my name's Thomas Brosnan, and today we're going to talk about how we can burst the anxiety bubble. So in terms of an introduction, who am I? Like I said, my name's Thomas, and I have been a teacher in Harrow for the last 17 years. And I'm also a therapist as well, specialising in the treatment of addiction and behaviour. And I work with children, adolescents and adults. So having been a teacher and being a therapist, it's really quite humbling to be able to be in this position and to be able to help you guys today. So we're going to look at what anxiety actually is. We're also going to explore the headlines thus far, globally and more locally with us here in Harrow and in the world of education. We're going to explore what anxiety means for you. And I've spoken to some of my colleagues in the borough and outside of the borough who are teachers in FE, in primary schools, SLT members as well, to really get an understanding of what anxiety means for them. I've also, through the conversations I've had with my colleagues, is asked them what anxieties they are currently experiencing. And I've also inquired about their support mechanisms, and that's what we're going to look at as well. We're going to take a bit of a holistic view here as to what your anxiety-free life would look like, and then I've got the opportunity for some questions and signposting you guys to some various services and organisations that are super helpful in their efforts so far. So if we're looking at anxiety as a definition, by definition, this is what the dictionary would say, that anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. And there are some very similar words here, because people with anxiety often worry. People with anxiety often express a concern or an apprehension or a consternation about one thing or another. Equally, anxiety can mean a strong desire or a concern to do something or for something to happen. And this is where the fear comes into it. There's often an eagerness to remove that fear, a keenness for it to be gone, a desire to do something to replace it or to avoid it, an impatience as well, a sense of impending doom, a longingness and a yearningness for things to be, normal. And again, that's what we're going to look at shortly when we explore the cycle of anxiety. So this infographic here is, as you can see, it's like, a time bomb, ticking time bomb, something waiting to happen, something waiting to explode. And this is what I'm hearing a lot about, in teaching, is burnout. And it's brought on a lot of the time by compassion fatigue and Zoom fatigue as well. Right now, I know that when I was teaching up to September, a lot of my lessons during the first lockdown were taking place online. Probably, in fact, all of them were taking place online, because there's only a handful that weren't. Because I taught design and technology, it's a very practical subject, so it's quite difficult to be able to teach a practical subject online. So I was spending a lot of time online, researching materials and resources that how it could be implemented in that way. So I know a lot of my teaching colleagues as well are experiencing Zoom fatigue, spending hours and hours on end on the computer, preparing lessons and resources, and then having to deliver them as well. And also, not to mention the age-old fact of not having enough time, and to highlight that this is not only the result of being overworked and underpaid, as some would report, but it's also the result of prolonged stress and feeling isolated and unsupported, and not just at work, but in our personal lives as well. There's an expectation of doing more with less time and for less money, with ever reducing resources. And these are increasing factors in the teaching profession, and what I'm hearing in my therapy work, a contributing cause of anxiety. And again, given the feedback from what I've heard whilst preparing for this webinar. So if we look at this image, I think it's fair to say that I know for me, I can identify with at least one of these words. Can you? And how many of you could identify with 2 or 3 or even 4 or more of the words on this infographic? So I'm sure you can appreciate how anxiety is literally that ticking time bomb waiting to explode. So let's do something about it now while we can, before it's too late. So if we look a little bit more closely at the cycle of anxiety, anxiety is a natural coping mechanism of the body to alert us and prepare us for danger. And this is where we could relate it to the fight or flight scenario. And we would also do well to be mindful of the cortisol levels in the body here, as when they spike, there's a surge of amino acids which are released from the muscles, and glucose is released from the liver into the bloodstream. So we're supplied with the energy needed to deal with the crisis situation at hand. However, prolonged elevated levels of cortisol can increase anxiety, zap our energy, and interfere with our body's ability to heal, hence the arising anxiety. You see, our bodies are actually equipped with natural self-repair mechanisms that fight cancer, prevent infection, repair wounds, and protect us from infectious agents in foreign bodies. But those natural self-repair mechanisms get deactivated when the body is full of stress hormones like cortisol. So in the long run, high levels of cortisol decrease the immune system's response, which in turn increases the risk of developing all sorts of diseases like arthritis, cancer, and autoimmune disorders like diabetes. In addition, it can also trigger mental health issues like mood swings, anxiety, and depression, which we are all too familiar with. However, anxiety often evokes and is associated with fear, as I mentioned before, but the fear itself is not something to be feared. More so, it's a sign. For example, on one hand, fear can prepare us for danger. That's true. But on the other, it can inspire us to take action. So understanding what's underpinning the fear is crucial. And this is something we're going to hear about later in one of the videos we have. So that said, an anxiety triggering situation like feeling pressured, not having enough time, or feeling fearful, which I'm hearing a lot from educators I work with, and again, I know from my own experience of teaching in Harrow for 17 years, leads to uncomfortable sensations in the body, such as a racing heart, sweating, or even like feeling like we're going to faint. And it is here that we can appreciate the warning signs in the body to know the true source of the feeling. Just like when the petrol light comes on in the car, we know we need to refuel. So when we feel this in our body, we know how best to respond rather than react with something in a way which is not going to be helpful. And we're going to look at support mechanisms a little bit later. So when it comes to avoidance here, avoidance, these uncomfortable feelings are often seemingly, but in reality, not controlled by avoiding the triggering situation, by engaging in behaviors like not attending work, procrastinating on challenging tasks, and engaging in addictive processes such as smoking, taking drugs, drinking alcohol, or even behavioral ones like shopping, exercise, and gaming. So short-term relief can be brought about by avoiding the anxiety-producing situation, and this offers an immediate temporary relief. But the symptoms may dissipate. However, they are still there under the surface, and they must be fully explored to really recognize their true source to ensure sustainable psychological freedom. So in terms of our long-term growth, how do we do this? Well, this is where effective therapeutic interventions are key to offer stability and the opportunity for the person to explore their reality, to have the efficacy not to avoid any situation in the future. So looking at some headlines, okay, globally, okay, 450 million people suffer with neurological disorders. 300 million people are affected by depression. On a more local level, given a recent health survey conducted by the Education Support Organisation, 75% of educators have suffered stress or other anxiety-related symptoms in the last 2 years. 1 in 5 have experienced panic attacks. 56% have reported to have had insomnia and or other sleeping related difficulties. And I know that sleeping is one of the other webinars featured here. So if you are having any difficulties with your sleep, or people you know are, please, do take time to watch that webinar as well. And 41% of people have expressed difficulty concentrating, which, as we know in education, we need to concentrate. We need to be thinking about what we're doing. And that's where we can reflect on what anxiety actually means. What does it mean to us? And this is where I caught up with Krupa Patel, the acting head of Shaftesbury, to find out a little bit more about what it means to her. So I'm going to play this video.
anxiety management means just that, is finding ways to manage anxiety. Before you get to the points of management, there needs to be some real home truths and that recognition that anxiety is occurring. And because anxiety is so different for everyone, investing in that time to understand it, to sit with it, to try and label it, and then move forward in understanding it, and then the processes of that to help you with that is just so key in able to managing it.
So I'm sure there's some of you who can identify with what
anxiety management
Krupa is speaking about there. So when we're talking about what anxieties are you currently experiencing, again, I caught up with some of my colleagues to find out a little bit more from them about what they're currently experiencing. And here's what Mr. Simon Sackwood from Shaftesbury High School had to say.
Well, the anxiety I guess I'm most experiencing is being concerned about the well-being and health of colleagues and students, but also my capacity to be able to manage and to contain what I'm doing.
And again, I'm sure, you know, there's some of you out there who can identify with what Mr. Sackwood is saying. I also caught up with my friend Mary Desmond, who is a primary school teacher in Brent.
I would say at work, the main reason if I ever get anxious or if I ever get stressed at work, it is due to there never being enough time in the day to get things done and to meet deadlines. Generally speaking, I would say in the classroom, if that's all I had to deal with, if I didn't have any other responsibility around the school, then there would be enough time to get things done. But because I have responsibilities in other places around the school and I have to get other things done, then that's when my time constraints come in. And it's always a race to get things done. So that can sometimes create a little bit of anxiety.
So again, we're hearing about time being of the essence and being in short supply. So when I'm curious to know what support mechanisms people have in place, preparing for this webinar, and I'm talking to my colleagues again, teachers, LSAs, SLT members, what I'm hearing is that people would really value time to talk. They would really value that space to talk with somebody who actually identifies and can appreciate what they're going through. People are telling me that they like to kind of have these means of escapism by gaming, on the weekend of an evening, just doing something that's going to take their mind off work. Equally, I'm hearing that smoking is a means of distraction, a means of avoidance, a means of not having to deal with something. But psychologically, the impact of smoking, what it does for us is it gives us this ability to feel like we can cope in the moment, just as alcohol might give us this desire to feel like we can have the confidence to do with what we need to do. Alcohol and smoking are two very prevalent kind of things that people are doing to enable them to kind of falsely cope in that moment. Netflix, again, something I'm hearing people love to do of an evening, just chill out, switch off, tune in, whether it's Amazon Prime or watching Netflix, there's always something, to be had there. Music, such a powerful commodity for the mind, for the body, for bringing that connection together. When we're often experiencing anxiety, there's often that disconnect from the mind and the body, but music can really be quite cathartic and help to build and create that synergy. Exercise, again, something that's going to get our heart, racing and the blood pumping around our body. We're going to come to that a little bit more, shortly, but certainly having a healthy activity to engage in, which is going to be so helpful for us. And equally something that's creative, something that's mindful, whether we're painting, whether we're drawing, whether we are, building something, doing jigsaws, things like that. It's all about being creative as, having healthy support mechanisms over unhealthy ones. So what would people like to have in place to support them? Again, I'm going to come back to a conversation that I had with Krupa to hear what she had to say.
I'm incredibly fortunate to have systems in place, but for me, so far, is having a coach and having a mentor has been, just incredibly valuable. But I think also having that transparent relationship with Team SLT, saying, I'm just finding today really hard. And they get it, and we have that language, and we understand one another in that way. So it's really rare to find that. So I truly cherish that. But I don't think there's a clear-cut answer for many people. And I really hope that those that are on this program today and leaders that are thinking about anxiety really work on relationship and work on that self-discovery and thinking about their innate and what they're doing to look after themselves. Because if we're not okay, a lot of people crumble from that. Wishing you all really, really well, and I hope that's helped. Take care.
Thank you, Krupa, and I hope it's helped for you guys listening to that as well. So in terms of thinking, what our anxiety-free life would look like, I'd ask you just to ponder that for a moment and really just think about what comes up for you. So what would your anxiety-free life look like? What comes up for you? And when I ask this question, people envisage worrying less about hypothetical situations. People envisage feeling better emotionally, physically and mentally. Some also share that they would have better relationships with family, friends, and more importantly, a better understanding of themselves. Some teachers I've spoken to say that they'd be less snappy in class and generally have a more positive outlook on life overall. But to do this, the key is to shift the body from that stress response to that relaxation response. And here's the good thing. The great news is that it's not actually that difficult to do. And when it happens, those cortisol levels we spoke about earlier drop and our body's self-repair mechanisms get back to work. So let's look at what I call the power of three. So in the power of three, what I'm talking about here is something that's going to, get our heart racing and our blood pumping. So doing an exercise class, going out for a run. Running typically is something that people might do by themselves, and that's something that anxiety does, something that mental health conditions do. They have this ability to isolate us, but if we can get out more and engage with other people, that's going to be really, really helpful. So that's number one. Doing something that's going to get our blood pumping around our body and our heart racing. Number two, do something that's mentally stimulating. Lots of us have got people who, come from other countries. Schools are very multicultural environments. Like I know, for example, the school where I worked at Shaftesbury, or work at Shaftesbury rather, where I used to work at Harrow College as well. Lots of different nationalities of people, lots of different languages being, shared in the staff room. So, let's take time to learn some of these languages and learn a word or two. Tap into a podcast. What are you into? Whether it's Jim Quick, whether it's Joe Rogan, whether it's your favorite sports personality or whoever it is, really think about how you can engage mentally in these podcasts, because there is a wealth of information there to learn. Reading as well, talking about the wealth of information. Books are a great resource for us. And, the more we read, the more we obviously educate ourselves and ultimately educate our young people, because the knowledge that we get from reading it's powerful, but it only becomes powerful if we implement it. And that's what we can do in the classroom. We can implement this knowledge so our young people become powerful in their endeavors to be the best versions of themselves they can be. And that's why we're creating these podcasts with mine. That's why you guys are listening to it as well, to hopefully become the best versions of yourself you can be. And then finally, number three is about doing something that's nourishing, having some good food, really thinking about the food that you eat. Laughing. I mean, when was the last time you actually belly laughed? I mean, watching a comedy show, something, that's going to really, really put a smile on your face. Psychologically, the power of laughter is huge for the human body. It really is. And also tied in with that, thinking about sleeping, having a regular sleep pattern. I know there's been another webinar on sleep as well, so please do make sure you check that one out. But when we sleep, that's when the body has its opportunity to regulate. And that's where we are able to self-regulate our emotions by getting enough sleep. We ensure that we charge our telephones at night, or our AirPods, or our watches. So let's make sure that we charge ourselves at night as well to be able to perform at the optimum levels we are required to in school, just as we expect that of our technological devices as well. And finally, family. Yeah, our family and our friends around us are essentially the most nourishing people that we need in our lives and that need us in their lives. So let's make sure we're at our best. Stretching as well, that you can see, the mother and her child doing here as well. Stretching is so good for the body, and it's something that is very much underrated or even overlooked. So let's make sure we do more of that moving forward. So in terms of some signposting, Mind, obviously, the organisation that's putting this together with Harrow Talking Therapies, there's their website. There's a link to Every Mind Matters, and they have a wonderful page on anxiety there from the NHS. My webpage there is my private practice, thought-based therapy. Just Get Flux, again, we talked about Zoom fatigue. Lots of us at the moment are spending an enormous amount of time on the computer screens, not just during the working day, but in the evening as well. And Just Get Flux helps to educate us around the impact of the blue screen. So when our screen is very bright at night time, our mind thinks it's actually daytime. So we're not in that position to go to bed or be ready to switch off. And then finally, the Provider Resilience app is for frontline workers, whether it's us as teachers or healthcare workers or people in the services. It really is a very good app designed to give you an opportunity to self-assess where you are at with your resilience, with your mental wellness. So do check that out. And if you have any questions, you can email me. Again, as I said, my name is Thomas, and you can email me at thoughtbasedtherapy.com. So if you have any questions, if you've liked anything, if you're curious about anything, if you just like to check in and have a conversation, then please feel free. It's been a pleasure to be able to speak with you today, to be able to share this information with you. I hope you found it helpful. Please do check out the other webinars that we have for you. And thanks again to Mind and Harrow Talking Therapies and everybody involved for making this possible. Thank you.